if your partner's doing a complaint and you would like appreciation, the thing to acknowledge is the validity of that complaint. The ways, even if you don't agree with the whole thing, any part of it that you can acknowledge, any truth that there might be in the complaint, the more you acknowledge and lead with that, the more it relaxes the system, and appreciation can just flow. All right, so another example, and this one's a more personal, this is in our relationship. Years ago, I was writing an email to a customer of a business of ours. And we were giving this customer a refund. And in the email, I didn't mention or acknowledge Jennifer at all. I only used the word I instead of the word we in talking about how I was taking responsibility for what had gone wrong, and I was willing to give them this refund, and I was going to make sure they got their money and all that stuff. And Jennifer got really hurt, upset, because this was not an isolated thing. This was kind of a part of a larger pattern where I would project myself as the business, and Jennifer would feel left out, or that I wasn't projecting us as a we.
Yeah, gosh, it's been so many years. Like, going back to that example, what I remember is I was like, hey, this is our business, not just yours. Hey, we're both granting this refund in this case to really make good and create a good experience for this customer. Hey, like, say we. I wanted him to use we and acknowledge that it was us and it was our business and our decision and our money ultimately that was going back. And it wasn't just that email, it was a bunch of emails. It was like, talking to people about what we offer, what we do. And I had a habit, of course, in my emails of always saying we, because I thought of the business as a we. And so I got triggered in that moment at the I was like, hey, it's us. Give me some credit here. Yeah.
And it sounds kind of cute now, but at the time it wasn't cute.
Oh, yeah. I was sad. I was hurt.
It got grindy, and we were, Jennifer's upset, and then I was upset, and everybody's upset. And so I immediately got very defensive, hey, why did you use I instead of we? And I really thought that if Jennifer could somehow get a visitor ticket inside my experience, if she could kind of look through my eyeballs and put her fingers in my finger slots and see how I thought of it, she wouldn't be upset. Because in my mind, we were partners and I valued her and I was only doing this thing for some excusey reason or whatever. And so every time she's like, hey, we instead of I would respond with, well, but what you don't understand, honey, is blah, 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 blah. And I would try and come up with some defensive thing. Basically to really like show her what I meant and my intention. And the more I did that, the more upset Jennifer got, the more angry she got. And the more angry she got, the more emphatic I was trying to show her, no, you don't understand. Anyway, so it escalated and escalated the way the pattern does.
And just to kind of narrate a little bit of this story, for those of you listening, it makes sense if in that moment you think, well, if only they would just understand where I was coming from, they wouldn't complain and they would appreciate me more. And that, if I had $1 for every time, I've heard that one from couples that we work with. It's such a common thing, and it seems logical. It seems reasonable. What Bryan is saying. It seems reasonable that if I could just have her understand where I was coming from, she would stop complaining. She would get me. And so that didn't work. No,
it just made more complaining.
So why doesn't that work? And for those of you that have tried that and had that same and said that same thing, we want to explain, why does that not work? Because it seems like it ought to. If you're in the defense, if you're in the wanting appreciation from your partner, it seems like that ought to work. But we're here to kind of tell you why that doesn't tend to work.
We have a comment that says, this advice we're giving to acknowledge any truth of the complaint is kind of tough to do,
yes.
Especially when the complaint feels like it's aimed at like who you are. And so that acknowledging even a part of the complaint feels like putting yourself in a box that you don't want to be put in. And that's
It's like
exactly
admitting you're wrong.
yeah. Or that I am a bad person, like I am somehow diminished. You know, you're a loser, they say, and I'm like, oh man, how do I agree with I'm a loser? And I don't want to be in that box. And yes, it is hard, which is one of the reasons why the automatic impulse is just to continue to
defend, right?
Yeah.
It's much. This is why people get caught in this cycle, is because it's as natural as anything. We're not trying to tell you that there's something wrong with you for defending when you feel attacked, when someone's complaining. It's as natural as it gets to protect. Like biologically, all systems need to kind of protect their boundaries in order to survive. Like this is in our very survival. What we are saying, and we're going to get to, like, okay, how do we make this easy, or how do we unwind this? But what we are saying is that proclivity to defend and then to complain and then to defend is what perpetuates the very cycle. So there's got to be an exit ramp, right? If defending, even though that feels natural and even biologically necessary at times, is there a way out that feels attainable? And so let's distinguish a little bit what we mean when we say acknowledge and what acknowledgement is and isn't. Well,
back to the story.
Yeah, back to the story.
Maybe
yes.
I can demonstrate it there.
Yeah, we'll use the story.
And someone said, isn't that like empathy? And yes, I think empathy is actually, if you stop and start empathizing, that's how you can start to understand what they're really saying with the complaint.
And there's just a particular brand of it that we're recommending that's custom designed to unwind things.
Exactly. Because empathy by itself could or could not necessarily unwind the pattern.
Like one version of empathy could be, oh, I understand why you're upset.
I really feel, you sound very angry.
Yeah, you're angry, and I really get that.
I get how angry you are. Yes.
And while that's a step in the right direction, it's the solutions that we're sharing with you today are designed to actually unwind the dynamic itself so that you can't keep holding on to it. And while empathy is, again, positive, good, in the right direction, the person that's still holding it, like if in this case, had he just said and nothing more, yeah, I see why you're upset. Because you see, the business is ours. I can really feel you. I really get how upset you were. Now, for those of you listening, can you climb into for a moment why I wouldn't have felt in this case, all the way vindicated or all the way resolved around that? Right?
You might have to help me.
So
I'm like, no, that's great. Isn't that what you want?
No. So what's happening under the surface for those people that are in the complaint is I have a secret for you, and see if you resonate, because we've all been the complainers. I guarantee you, we've all done it at least once. And if you haven't, you come teach us how to never do it again. But if you have been the complainer, usually underneath every complaint is a value that you're standing for, right? In this case, it's been a few years, but what I remember is I was really standing for holding ourselves in the business as a partnership. And it was important that we are a partnership. We aren't a patriarchy or a matriarchy. We're not a hierarchy where there's one person that's in charge and the rest of the people are following. In that moment, even if I didn't do it as beautifully as I could have, just to use our example, I was complaining that he wasn't valuing or holding partnership, at least in the way I wanted in that moment, which would have been to use the we language. So that was where I was coming from. So if you know that about your partner, that if they're complaining, the complaint is usually the garbage layer, right? There's many layers of truth. And one layer was the complaint, like, why aren't you using we language, and you're not treating me right? Like, that's the complaint layer. But underneath, if we go under, like, what am I really fighting for that feels precious, that is worth standing for, that even he would agree is a value he holds? And for me in that moment, it was partnership. So just giving me understanding starts me on the path. Just giving me empathy for that I might feel like our partnership wasn't held is part of it. But what gets me all the way there, what really unwinds the dynamic so that I don't still have to be on guard for whether the partnership is being held, is not only the acknowledgement of the ways that maybe that wasn't communicating that to the people around us as good as saying we, right? I changing the I to we. Got it. Okay. So I get that we would maybe communicate that better. It doesn't cost him much, but also that this value of partnership is worth him standing for on his own. And that if he sees a vision for a way of interacting where people really feel how partnered that we really are, that's a positive vision for him to step into, right? And when I see that he's willing and wanting to live into that vision, where he's adding not just complacency, like, hey, I can defend that I said it was right of me to do that. Instead of defending it, climbing in and providing the opposite ingredient, which is future vision, which is possibility, like, we could be even better examples of partnership. If I do this, I'm on board. I'm willing to restructure. I'm willing to see that vision. And that will allow the complainer, and me in this case, so there have been plenty of times it's the other way, but me in this case, it would let me go, he's on the same team with me, right? And so that helps unwind it. If you're in defense, the remedy for that pattern is acknowledgement and possibility, future vision, right? When you add that remedy, the opposite pole, the virtue on the other side of defense, suddenly I don't need to safeguard it anymore. He's on my team to safeguard this possibility and vision for the future, and that we're both holding it, and he's holding it with me, so I don't need to fight so hard. So then I can just appreciate what's happening. So that's the remedy. It's the opposite side. So for every one of these dynamics, these toxic cycles, if you provide the opposite side virtue
from the one that you want, if you're sitting there, I want my partner to appreciate me, the best way to get your partner to appreciate you is to bring possibility, right? You acknowledge what's here and you bring the possibility of a future. And then that will unlock it. It's like magic. We've seen couples again and again when they're able to really step in and provide the opposite pole, that in that moment, it starts to dissolve. All of the tension that was holding those in opposition starts to become more like a union, a complement, where the more appreciation you bring, the more future vision is available, the more future vision you bring, the more appreciation is expressed, and so on and so forth. They each become a virtuous cycle instead of a toxic cycle, where the more you add one, the more you get the other positive thing, right? So it unwinds. So that's part of the dynamic.